Welcome to the second half of your inflatable sculpture project. This week you are going to be making a mylar inflatable cardinal. You may choose another animal, but because it's Spirit Week, I thought it would be appropriate to encourage you guys to make a cardinal with your red mylar emergency blankets. And I'm going to walk you through the steps in these videos. There won't be an artist presentation this week because this is a slightly more challenging project, and the artists that you saw last week relate to this project. So mylar balloons are nothing new. These are some cheap ones I got at Target. They said Cheers. I guess no one's buying Cheers balloons right now because they were on sale. And they have an ironed seam, so it's slightly different. There are ways to take an iron to the seam of mylar, but we're not going to do it in this. For our project, we're going to use tape. And as you can see, it's just sealed. The sides are sealed, and then there's an opening in which I can stick a straw and inflate the mylar. And it has been cut into the shape of a letter. So very simple, straightforward. You see these in grocery stores all the time. Those balloons that you see that have Disney characters and cartoon characters and things are generally printed mylar because the mylar holds the air much longer and it's easier to cut and hold shapes than it is with the stretchier traditional balloons. So I'm going to be having you replicate an animal, and what I've done is put some pictures of Charles Harper's work into the week 5 folder, and that is to help you look at an animal, or specifically a cardinal, in terms of graphic shapes. Charles Harper is a artist that I grew up with in he's from Cincinnati, Ohio, and he would do posters and graphics for pretty much every zoo function or animal wildlife conservation thing there was. And so even as a young art student, I grew up doing a lot of projects where we emulated his work. He has passed on now, and he has become even more famous, as artists do when they die. And so you can find a lot of books and gift cards and things like that with Charles Harper's work on it. You can also just use a plain old picture of a cardinal, or you can use another animal if you decide that you just really don't want to do a cardinal. But looking at Charles Harper's work is very helpful in that it helps to simplify the shapes of the animal. And that is something that you're going to want to do when working on this project, because you're going to want a very pared down or very geometric version of the animal that you're going to make a pattern of. So the materials you'll need are all in your kit, and you're going to need the brown craft paper, the emergency blanket, some printouts. That's actually not in your kit, but a printout or just something on a screen or nearby that you can look at for reference of an animal, scissors, a writing utensil, and tape. So this first piece is going to be a cardinal that I'm kind of recreating from life, and I'm going to, using that photo ahead, draw a very simplified shape of that cardinal. And then now, you can't see it off screen, it's too big for me to have it on screen, but I'm actually folding the mylar blanket, opening it up and folding it in half. And then I'm going to tack it down to, or actually first I'm removing just some of the extra so I don't waste materials. And I'm going to tape it to the mylar blanket and tape the mylar blanket to itself. The reason I'm doing that, this is like pattern making. It's like you would do when you were making a pair of pants or sewing clothing. You would use pins to tack the pattern to the fabric so that it doesn't slip around. In this case, we're going to use tape. We're going to be cutting away where the tape is attaching it anyways. I cut off the excess, and then I tack it down even more. The more you tack it, the better. The 2 mylar pieces that are next to each other, because that's 2 mylar pieces sandwiched together, as you can see there, and then the pattern on top. And I'm going to just go about carefully cutting away around the pattern I'm deviating a little bit from my drawing because I decided that the wings on the bird were a little bit more full. I made it look more like a hawk than a cardinal. And I'm just slowly, carefully cutting. I've sped this up, so I'm going much, much, much slower than what you're seeing. And so now I have 2 pieces of mylar. They're cut in a specific shape. And I've decided, and you don't have to do this, you can do a flat, interesting shape that you inflate, but I've decided that I just want to put a beak on the front. Part of the nice thing about these blankets is that they are 2 separate colors. They're reversible. So you can, if you want a different color mylar to stand out, you can just flip it over and use the reverse side. So I'm taping the sides of the beak together. And because this is a separate piece that will be inflated through the main chamber, the big bird part, I have to then attach it but first create a hole so that the air will go through the big piece and then inflate the smaller piece. So you can see that hole there. And then I'm going to tape either side of the beak so that it's a little chamber onto that hole. Like I said, you don't have to do this. You don't have to. You can tape 2 pieces together that are shaped like a bird, and that is fine. You don't have to do external pieces. I'm also going to show you another one where I do even more chambers. But that is advanced. I encourage you to meet the challenge if you can. And now I'm tacking the edges together so that it doesn't slip around, because I'm going to, in a minute, start taping the entire edge, the entire seam together. So first, just to keep everything in place, I'm just putting little pieces of tape all around the edges to hold those 2 pieces together. And so what I found is easiest for me, and you will find as you do this your own techniques, is that I like to work on a nice clean surface, and I'll even put the tape down and kind of tape the top edge to the table, then I'll peel the tape back up and wrap it around to the other side. So that is up to you. You'll find different ways. You can also slip a piece of tape under it, sticky side up, and stick the back end first and then fold the tape over. But either way, you're using small pieces of tape to wrap around the edges so that it seals it up, because you're making this balloon or this pillow. And so the tape works fairly well for sealing the edges up so that when you inflate this, it will contain air. So I encourage you to make something, a shape that is interesting, and to be so I encourage you to be experimental with your designs. If you wind up with something that doesn't work, you get really frustrated. If you show me a pile of tape and mylar that shows me the equivalent of a very hard one effort that doesn't have to be a success, I am okay with you not having a successful piece, as long as you try or experiment or push yourself. This isn't about making the best inflatable piece ever. It's about learning something new and trying to wrestle with the materials and see if you can learn how to build this. And especially because I'm not there to help you troubleshoot each part, there are many of you who won't have a success. And so as long as you don't cut corners and try to just make a big square and inflate it, I am happy. Like, do show me the failure so that I can give you credit. But don't, even a failure in this project is a success. The only failure is not trying or not experimenting. So I'm almost done. Especially around curves, you want to use smaller pieces. It's okay if the tape's a little messy or sticks out, because it's clear tape, especially with such a shiny surface, you're not going to really see it. It's not going to be an issue. So just take your time and overlap, each piece of tape needs to overlap the previous one so that you're sealing it, you're making an airtight chamber. And then continue all the way to the end, leaving a gap. And you're going to see in a little bit, you will see a gap that I've left so that I can inflate it. So now I have a straw. You might have to roll, if you don't have a straw at home, roll up a piece of paper to blow into it. And success. It actually held. Don't blow it up so much that you pop it. I've done that before. But you can see that I've gotten a bird-like shape that I can successfully inflate. So for this next one, I'm going to make it, I've sped up the video even faster because you've already seen how it's done. There's just one part in here that's going to be, or two parts that are going to be a little bit different. This is a similar design. It's a cardinal. This one is based off of a Charles Harper drawing. So I'm just following the graphic nature of that drawing. And I will be adding a chamber. So that's why I'm adding a second piece of paper, because I want that top wing to be a separate inflated piece that is attached to and inflated through the main body of the bird. And so once again, I'm going to get out my blanket, spread it out, and fold it in half so that I have two pieces. I am taping it down and taping the two sides of the blanket together so that they do not slip around. And then I'm going to cut this piece off to make life easy. Don't try to cut a little piece out of the middle of the blanket. It's way too hard. Just cut yourself a smaller, and you have a nice big blanket. So if things go wrong, there is always more to work with. Also, if you're working on your piece and this happened to me, it rips, just use the tape to seal it up. Use the tape to fix your tears. It's just kind of like sewing almost. So now you can see it's kind of starting to slip around. It's getting difficult, so I'm going to tape it again. The little time that you take to do extra things for yourself to keep things from slipping around, adding little tape to tack it together, the better off you are. As you can see, it's kind of a heart shape. I could have just, if I was smart enough to kind of see ahead of the game and read the shape, I could have cut a heart and folded it in half. And I've cut out that hole as the chamber that is going to be inflated. You know, that's where the air is going to go from the main bird body through to that wing. Cut off the extra so that you conserve materials. And once again, we're going to start taping everything down, tacking as much as the edges and the pattern to the piece as possible to make our life simple-ish. And then cut your piece from the main. Normally in pattern making you wouldn't do that, so that you could save as much material as possible. In this case though, go ahead and cut off the excess so that you're not wrestling with it as you try to cut out this piece. So now I've cut out the side, it's starting to slip around, so I tack it back down again. And I've cut off the beak because I will once again use the silver color to do the beak instead of the red color so that I have some contrast. Give yourself a nice big flat surface. Either use a kitchen table when no one's around, clean off your desk. Something to make it easy to do this is to have a nice big flat surface to put everything on. So now I have my two pieces that are the main body. That was just a piece of tape that's stuck on there. And my wing. Now to get the wing to inflate, and if you notice I did the wing backwards, so I have to actually do my piece in the sort of mirror image of the Charles Harper piece. But I need to cut a hole in the main body of the bird that matches that hole. So I've used my marker to draw where I want that hole. And now I'm going to take that wing and use some tape and connect the insides of that hole together so that when I inflate the bird, the air goes through the bird and into that wing compartment. This is a little bit of a more difficult engineering. I encourage you all to try it, to try an extra compartment that inflates. But if you're already feeling that your brain's hurting with just trying to tape the project together and figure out a shape and cut it out, then just skip that and make a very simple bird outline shape. And so now I'm going to go and tape the wing. It's a little bit trickier because now I have this extra piece behind it that I have to avoid. But now I'm going to just tape the entire wing closed because when I blow up the bird, the air will go through that hole I made to blow up the wing. So now you can see it's just kind of becoming a pocket. And one big long piece of tape for that final part. Now I have this sealed pocket on the side of the bird and the hole that will allow it to inflate. And now I'm going to cut out the beak. So like I said, if this seems daunting or uninteresting, if you want to try a different animal, you by all means may try a different animal. Also, everything does not have to be inflated. So like last year I had a beautiful jellyfish that someone made and the tentacles were not inflated. They were just kind of like streamers that hung down from it. So be creative. I am always excited for any student that wants to make a creative deviation or alternative. So I'm just adding that beak on. And then I'm going to start sealing up the sides of the bird. So this is like a baking show where I've cut to the finished project because you've already seen me seal up the side of one bird. So I've just taped it all together. Um, that's the tail, but I've left the opening at the bottom of the tail so I can put the straw in. And then I am going to inflate it. And as you can see, as I inflate it, the air is going through the bird and then through that hole that I've made to the wing so that the wing inflates too. And it loses its sort of air pretty quickly. So I could go around and troubleshoot and just figure out, where my leaks are. But it's sufficient if you can blow it up and it can contain air, at least for a moment, for a photograph or video. This is totally fine. It doesn't need to be perfectly airtight. If you have huge gaps, it will not inflate. So you do need to seal it up well enough that it inflates this much. But that's it. That is what you are going to do for this week's project. So your assignment is to create an inflatable cardinal using the video instructions as a guide, or you may choose another animal if you prefer. And the materials you're going to need are the Mylar survival blanket, scissors, clear tape, brown craft paper, a writing utensil to draw out your pattern, and an image of cardinal or another animal to help guide your work. So I want you to draw a simplified shape of an animal on the craft paper to serve as your pattern. And then remember to make it larger than you want your final piece to be. And this is something I forgot to go over. But remember, when you inflate something, it actually shrinks. So if you went back and looked at that, those letters I inflated at the beginning, you would see that that R is kind of a funny shape. But when I blew it up, it kind of got really tight and smushed together to make an R. When you blow something up, it is going to shrink in size because it's going to expand in width. So the length will shorten. So you need to make this bigger than you think you need it. If you're going to make a piece that has multiple pattern parts, make sure you make a separate pattern for each of those parts. Then you're going to open up the Mylar survival blanket and fold it in half. You're going to tack the two sides together so that it doesn't slip around, and tack your pattern to the top of that. And then you're going to carefully cut out your pattern pieces. If you're making multiple chambers, you need to cut a hole between the two chamber pieces and tape those together. Then you're going to tape along the edges of the shapes to seal them up so that they trap air. And do not forget to leave a small gap for inflating it. Then find a straw or roll up a piece of paper and insert it in the gap. Blow into the straw to inflate the piece, and photograph or film the final piece and submit your work in the week 5 voice thread. This project is due the day before your first class next week. So we're starting on, our first class is on Tuesday next week. So either you are going to submit it on a Monday or a Tuesday. And let me know if you have any questions. All right, have fun.